All right, why don't I do that? So recording's in progress. So it's 10 o'clock. Let's go ahead and start on time. This is the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association meeting with Omar Parsons, or
Passons, yes, and Jim Ortball.
And Jim Ortball. How you doing, Jim?
Good, Mike. Thank you for having Omar and I.
Oh, you're very welcome. So the subject here, I'm going to go to the next chart, and I just want to say, hey, please, mute your mics until such time you speak. But here, 10 o'clock to about 10:20 is a presentation by the City of San Jose staff about the emergency interim housing. That includes at Noble as well as other sites. From 10:20 to 11:30 is really questions and answer and feedback to the city. I'd like to ask if you would type your question using the Zoom chat capability. There's a little chat icon in Zoom. You can just press on that and then we can view those individually. Please, when you do that, please send the message to all. When your question is called, unmute your mic so that you can engage in the conversation with the individuals. Next chart. This was the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association statement that I sent to you, Omar, as well as I didn't get it to Jim, but I'll read it here for the audience that is sitting here. As the president of the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association, I wanted to give you some feedback from the P&A community that had contacted me with respect to the tiny proposed homeless sites in Noble Park, all right, adjacent to the Penitentiary neighborhood. Rest assured, I can tell you that the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association are advocates for addressing the homeless issue in San Jose, and that we, want to work with the city of San Jose in order to do that. Okay, we feel that this housing should be vetted by our government representatives as a matter of the facilities, in a manner that facilitates the issues of housing, addresses the necessary resources to support this homeless transition when they do transition from homeless to able bodies within the community. And it integrates the safety of the existing community also, all right? At this juncture, I had tremendous feedback from the community within Penitentiary neighborhood that says there is a concern that inserting this site or this tiny homes in Noble Park area is in the wrong solution. It has the location is not appropriate, and it needs to be readdressed by the city of San Jose to vet other areas that could be addressed for tiny homes. That being said, what I was going to do is ask Omar, if you want to give your presentation at this particular time, tell me how to share your screen, or go ahead and press share, or whatever you have to do. You have to go off mute.
You'd think after 2 years we would have got this. It says that host disabled participant screen sharing. So I think you have to, there's a button on the bottom that enables you as the host to allow participant to share.
Okay. Let me look at my my apologies for I got a thing called remote control. I can give it to Omar, I guess. Auto accept all requests, share clipboard. What do I do when I
think you may have just done it. Let me see. Oh, nope.
I thought I did. I will stop my sharing.
Okay.
And now let's see if
that may have allowed it. Maybe, Mike, if you stop sharing, maybe Omar, you can attempt, and it might let you, I don't know, you still may have to give authorization, but maybe you want to give it a try, Omar?
Yeah, I did. I'm looking to see find the little nugget that just explains it. It's been a while since I've done this from somebody else, like explained it to somebody.
Okay, how about this? I got multiple people can share simultaneously.
Yeah, let's try. Oh, here we go. We're good. All right.
Are we good?
Yeah. Just give me one quick second. I will hit the little button again here. If I did it right, you should now be looking at the screen of a worker in San Jose, engaging a gentleman here in our community. Do you see that?
We
We
have
do.
that. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. So thanks again, Mike and the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association for hosting this session, allowing Jim and I to come on and share a couple of things I want to just level set right off the bat for your neighbors and colleagues that are here. The first is, so this will be just about 10, 12 minutes, and then most of it, as Mike alluded to, will be us answering your questions and a more of a dialogue. We just want to provide some background to give context for how we got here and some of those kinds of things. It's hosted by the PNA. There are several other sessions. I actually put the website in the chat so you can click for background information to read the key documents from the city council. There's a list of all the 140 sites that were previously reviewed, including what feedback was associated with those sites. The other thing before I get started, I just want to say, we as city staff, we recognize and would have liked to have come out earlier and engaged, and all I can do is apologize that we weren't able to do that, and just move forward and try to be as engaged and create as many opportunities as possible. So I know that that's frustrating, and I'm sorry about that. We will, just to reiterate, as Mike mentioned, after this 10-12 minutes or so, we'll go ahead and shift to taking questions. Mike has asked, since again, this is a PNA meeting, that you put your questions in the chat, and Jim and I will do our best to sort of read through those and answer. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started. Perhaps. There we go. So I mentioned that my name is Omar Passons. I'm a deputy city manager with the city of San Jose. I joined the city last month. I previously did similar work at the county of San Diego for the county government that has a sort of a slightly broader and different sort of mission, but also focused on preventing and ending homelessness and helping people really get access and connected to the services and supports that they need. What we're really here today to do is to do three things, and none of those things is to convince the community that the Noble site or any other site is the appropriate, or I should say the best choice. The city council gave us some very clear direction, and we'll share what that is. But we're hoping to have an engagement where we actually do get some input on alternative locations in the community that maybe the community may prefer, to Mike's point in his comments when we started. I think that would be a really helpful thing for us. We have already started taking in additional comments and site suggestions. We've received several at other meetings, and we have a site form that you can see on that link where you can type in information directly. So we're here to inform, just to give you some background. Two, this is where we'll spend most of our time, just engaging around the issues and hearing from you as members of the community, and then notify. There will be future opportunities to speak and engage as members of the community, to have your voice heard, to frankly to help shape the future. I mean, this is a thing that we as a community are all confronting ways to try to make better for everybody. And so that's really the key: inform, engage, and notify. And so on that inform, we'll just jump right in. Was really quickly going to level set, because a lot of people actually don't understand or don't even know how big the homelessness crisis in San Jose is. We can kind of feel what we see when we're out and about. Many neighbors have family members who unfortunately have experienced homelessness, or they themselves have formerly been homeless. Some of our neighbors are actually unhoused right now. And part of our outreach and engagement strategy is also to go into encamped locations and have conversations with our unhoused neighbors and try to make sure to have solutions, because we really want solutions that people will use. And so we want to hear from everybody that's involved. So we'll talk a little bit about the site selection process and what emergency interim housing is. And then we'll spend, as I said, the bulk of the time on your perspectives and solutions and sort of what happens next. For those that are just joining, again, my name is Omar Passons. I'm a deputy city manager with the city of San Jose. I'm joined by Jim Ortball, former deputy city manager and the leader of the sort of production of side of this entire effort, and just a key partner in the work, also in the city manager's office. So again, to inform, just to start off, it's important to sort of understand that there are over 5,000 people that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the city of San Jose. So in February, there was a big count. We know that the count has some, it doesn't get everybody for a variety of reasons, but at least 5,000 people, even after you factor in all the emergency shelter and transitional housing and interim housing that already exists, there are over 5,000 people on the street. And that's part of the reason that we're in this process. One thing I want to share, though, is that for the city of San Jose, the number of people who are unsheltered, that is unhoused and living outside, has actually gone down a little bit, in part because of solutions like developing these emergency interim homes. So again, as I said from the outset, Jim and I are not here to convince the community that the noble side or one side or the other is the perfect site or the right site in the community. And the city council did direct us to go out and solicit alternative site locations and evaluate those. So we'll talk more about that in just a couple minutes. So one of the things that we hear a lot is, does the city even have a plan for this? What's the thinking around trying to prevent and end homelessness? And the city of San Jose is part of a much larger effort in Santa Clara County. There's a community plan to end homelessness, and it has 3 strategies. The community plan was signed on by almost all of the cities in Santa Clara County, the county government, the business sector, and nonprofits all signed on to these 3 strategies. And again, we're only taking about maybe another 6-7 minutes on these part, but it's important grounding. That first strategy, we often hear, man, we really need to focus on root causes and not just band-aids. And sure enough, one of the key strategies is address root causes of homelessness through system and policy change, really focusing there. The second strategy is expanding that homelessness prevention. You'll see in just a second that our region has prevented over 2,000 people from experiencing homelessness. And so you might wonder, and we'll talk a little bit about this, well, gosh, if you've prevented so much homelessness, why is there still so much? And we can talk a little bit about that. But that third strategy, and this one that really gets us into what we're here to talk about, is improve quality of life for unsheltered individuals. And I'm going to just underline that, create healthy neighborhoods for all. Healthy neighborhoods for people who are experiencing homelessness, healthy neighborhoods for people who aren't living in homes and want a healthy neighborhood for themselves, their families, etc. So those 3 strategies have yielded these results. And it can be hard to see the slide. One of the things that I'll mention for folks is that this deck is loaded on that same website that's in the chat. So you can scroll down and download it and read all the slides and the various data. It's, as I mentioned, there's nearly 6,000 people have been housed in our region. And, as you can see on here, over 2,000 have been prevented, right? So those 2 ends, the challenge is, and this is the part, I think one of your neighbors actually made this point very eloquently the other night, that you've got kind of this funnel. And the problem is that there's so many more people entering the homelessness experiences. And so we're really trying to work on that. Again, for those just joining, there's just about 5 more minutes of background, and then we're going to focus for the most of the time that we're together on your questions and our answers and more of a dialogue. So what happened? The mayor and council back in 2017, they said, look, we are directing staff to do an initial site search and begin to develop emergency interim homes. And part of that process, our team went out and evaluated over 140 sites. The direction was all 10 council districts, right? And so on that website that's linked in the chat, you can read that direction. You can actually see the full appendix of those 140 sites. That direction was go to all 10 districts. And then this year, there were 2 additional things that really brings us to the present day. One, they directed further action on several sites, including the Noble site. This was back in June. They said, go forward with the design stages. And at the same time, and this is the second piece, you have direction to consider alternative sites in those same communities. So maybe not the same location, but still in Council District 4, still in Council District 10, et cetera, on the same timeline. So that's what brings us here. Jim and I don't set policy, right? We do the research, we work with our staffs and the departments, and we bring things forward to council. The mayor and council sets policy for the region or sets direction, and then we go out and carry that out. So part of that process is really listening to the community, and that's why we're here. And again, as I said at the outset, we understand and know that it's frustrating that we did not connect earlier in the process. And again, on behalf of us and myself, I apologize. And we're really looking forward to getting this input and engagement today. So as I mentioned, the council said this is a shared responsibility. So far, there are proposed or current emergency interim communities in 8 of the 10 council districts, and there's an ongoing effort to that shared approach. One of the questions we get, and Mike, this is a little bit more focused up in your community, right, is what changed about the Noble site? The city evaluated it in 2017, and where we started was there. Even in 2017, there was no prohibition near residents and schools. What there was a creation of those being scoring factors that impacted the relative scoring. Again, we aren't here to say that Noble is the right side or not. In fact, our direction is to solicit other input and alternatives. But what changed? 2 things that are really important, or 3 actually. One, as I mentioned earlier, the homelessness crisis has worsened, and our mayor and council have said we want to take urgent action. And the second is that there was a premium placed on this rapid site identification and construction. For years, there were very few of these opportunities that were able to come online. And in the last couple of years, in part because of the pandemic and the urgency of the pandemic, many more have come into existence and are being used. So, and then the other thing that's important for people to know that we didn't have a couple years ago is they're actually in operation. And so we can talk to the service providers and that sort of thing. For those that are just joining, we're just got about 2 more minutes of slides, and then I'm going to unshare my screen and go to the Q&A portion. So just background, again, these slides are presented and available on the website that's in the chat link. It's really long, or I would just say it, but it's in the chat link. And this is where as we get turned towards the end, these are images from our community, and they aren't good images. They're not good for the human beings who are living in these conditions. That's not trauma informed. That's not a place for safety. It's certainly not a healthy neighborhood for anybody, for the person who is living in that circumstance, for the neighbors who are housed or unhoused, who are living nearby. And so the really important take-home point, wherever we end up with in the community, is not about a specific site. It's that when you call your elected official, right, or you call the city government and you say, I really want to help, right? As Mike said in the lead-in, your community, the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association, supports addressing homelessness, not at this location, which we heard that feedback, but supports addressing homelessness. And so what we need is a way to go from this to these, to something that is clean and orderly and has services and support that has a door that people can lock so that they can get some peace of mind, has a bathroom. The sites that we have been building that are emergency interim, not the original ones, but the ones we've been doing the last few sites, they have individualized bathrooms, they have supportive services, they have security, all of these types of things to create something that is safe and secure for both the people there and the community. And this is a short video. It's only 40 seconds. So I'll just play it really quickly. This is taken from a currently existing site. It's not staged. It's not, we just asked them to go take a video, like maybe 3 weeks ago. So I'll do that again. It's only 40 seconds and we're just about done. And I'll say, as video is playing, showing the laundry facility, the multi-use room, we had a chance to engage with a few of the residents that live here. What we find is that people really value that calm and the security of not having to worry about being outside. The services that we as residents of a community expect, like trash service and being able to get laundry done. And so we wanted to share that, not to convince anybody about a specific site, but to give a better sense of what the reality is. And so real quick on the sites, just so folks know, and again, these slides are available to download right from the site we put on the website, but we're talking about professional site management. A lot of times for everyone, people who are unhoused and otherwise, a person's pet is the most important connection in their life. And one of the things that we evolved is a recognition of the need to be able to care for pets so that people would come inside, and we found that makes a difference. So you can see some of the individualized services and supports. Again, these are not permanent destinations. The goal is people go there and work with a case manager to get into that next apartment, that next solution. Sometimes it's to reconnect with family. So it's not even always another government setting. So as we run to the end and turn over back to go back to the overall portion, I just want to say this. One of the questions that we get often is about these sites is what's going to happen around them? What are you planning? What are you doing? Not just on site, but around it. And so I want to just mention clean, safe, secure, and supportive. That regular trash in and around the site to make sure that we keep it clean and keep the surrounding areas clean, that it's safe, that we have a relationship, an ongoing relationship with San Jose Police Department, who are part of our core interaction team, so that we can evaluate any responses according to the risk of harm, really secure, and then supportive. Staff to provide that trauma-informed care and housing navigation support. Now, as we turn to the engage portion, I just want to ask Jim if there's anything that you want to add before we stop the share and move over.
Omar, yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing that information. Mike and another member of the community put some questions in the chat, and while you were presenting, I provided some preliminary answer and response related to where can they see the list of sites that have been evaluated, and I pointed them to the link that's on the website, and then questions around, does every city council district have the same number of emergency interim housing developments or interim housing? And I provided the answer that we've been directed to try and find to develop a community in each of the 10 council districts. And to date, 4 city council districts have an emergency interim housing community, districts 2, 3, 6, and 7. In June, the council identified 4 other districts to get emergency interim housing communities, and that was districts 1, 4, 5, and 10. To date, 2 districts don't have them, districts 8 and 9, for a variety of reasons. But again, that information is that link is there. You can go to it. You can see the sites. There are probably about a half a dozen other sites in District 4 that were evaluated alongside Noble, and for a variety of reasons, they didn't get recommended. The primary reason is those sites were in flood zones. That was probably the biggest reason why the alternative sites were not recommended. Probably among a variety of others, but just to give that baseline information, and we can certainly expand on that information. But that just a lot of that went in the chat while you're presenting. So if there aren't too many chat questions, I might be able to keep up with some of that. The other night, I think we had some 60, 70, 80 questions in the chat. So we couldn't quite keep up, and we just did the dialogue, but we can try and do both, given it's a smaller group. So thank you, Omar, for that.
Absolutely. And Mike, I don't know, is it okay with you if I just call on hands as we see them?
No, that'd be what I was going to suggest is, as we go through this chat, there was questions asked about the URL for the information that you were talking about. You've provided that. And as far as here's the information about the sites that the city staff have already evaluated, recommended June 2022 memo. I don't know if that link was in the chat.
Yeah, so Mike, so what we tried to do was use just like regular language on that. If you click on that link, you have to scroll down a little bit, but it actually literally just says the memo, including the 140 sites evaluated as appendix. So you'll see it just written right there on the screen. As a matter of fact,
You can share it.
Yeah,
if you
I'll
want
just
to, if
share my
people are
screen real
interested,
quick.
share that attachment, and we can kind of explain
Yeah, I'll do
what the
that.
attachment is and what it isn't.
Well, let me ask this question right here. Is for those people that are participants in this Zoom meeting, if you would like to ask a question or provide some feedback for this Zoom, please raise your hand. You can do that with a reaction down here at the, I think you can just raise your hand like this, and it brings your hand up.
And Mike, I do see Sandeep, so I'm going to go ahead and call on Sandeep. I just want to point out, so this is the page really quickly, just so folks who haven't clicked through can see it. It's got a little bit of background. It's got some frequently asked questions that you can click and read at your leisure. We'll probably update that because we've received lots of questions over the meeting so far. It has the meeting dates and times, and those will be we'll link to the recording so folks can watch them after if they want. There's a couple that will be hosted in multiple languages coming up in the next couple weeks. And then as mentioned before, you can see right before you get to the citing guidelines and alternative site form, there's the memo that has the 140 sites linked right there. And then even because we've had some folks, we don't, and Sandeep, I'm coming, I promise. I'll just say, we know that it's not the community's responsibility to find sites, but we also know and have heard from many neighbors that they want to find sites. They want to see if they can help find an alternative location. And a couple of neighbors actually asked, hey, can you make it easy for us and give us a way to see who owns what property? And so we went ahead and got this link that has a GIS map that is maintained by the assessor that allows for that. So I'm going to unshare my screen and ask Sandeep. I'll just come off of, how do I stop the share? There we go. Where's Sandeep?
And I would say this, Omar, if everybody would like to do that, we could pull up that attachment and look briefly at the alternative sites in District 4 that have already been evaluated and what the kind of disposition, if that's something that the group would like to do at some point in time.
Okay, let's take Sandeep, who's been waiting patiently. I think you're off mute, so go ahead, please.
First of all, Jimin, I'm sorry, I'm not able to pronounce the name.
Omar.
Omar. Jimin Omar, first of all, thank you. I would like to start with two lines from an article that I'm quoting from Mercury News dated June 21st. When the city previously proposed homeless housing there, they're referring to the Noble site, there was an outcry from the neighborhood, but the city staff said while they support engaging in community outreach, they cautioned against giving neighbors the opportunity to veto the project. So I'm actually glad that the city has chosen to start engaging with us and is considering other alternatives, perhaps because of the opposition that the neighbors are doing. But the elephant in the room really is that there are three issues primarily about this noble site. And give me 1 second. And by the way, most of the people are not objecting to the problem, the why, the problem of homelessness. We all want to solve it. But there are three main reasons the location and the way we're solving this problem is unviable. First is it is too close to the schools, too close to the library, and too close to the park. Apparently, it is actually a park, or was a proposed site that was supposed to be a park. So this is going to increase the risk to the kids, to the community, to the park resources, not just from the residents from these sites, but also other encampments that may end up near this site. The second is it is too far away from public transport, such as the VTA light rail. And obviously, it's less viable to these residents who would not have any cars. And third is you're using land that was previously supposed to be developed into a park. Now, this is also considered to be a park, whether it's designated as one or not. But instead, you're using a public park for homeless shelter. So ignoring all the homeless problems is not going to help, but neither will having unviable solutions. So what is the city thinking, and why was this park chosen instead of some other viable projects, despite these three main reasons that most of the neighbors are encountering?
Sandeep, I appreciate those questions. I'm going to answer all of them, and then actually probably ask Jim to chime in. I guess the first thing that I would say is we have heard loud and clear from you and many of your neighbors that first issue that you mentioned about the closeness to schools, libraries, and park. And the one thing that I would say, and this is not about the Noble site or the Fair Oak site or any particular site. It's that we're not here to pass judgment or critique people's concerns. You've raised them. It's our job to make sure that the elected officials understand and know what those concerns are. I think what we've seen in the experience of other sites is that the sites are not creating a disruption or a disturbance for the surrounding the people that are right around them. That said, that's not a counter to your concern, because I just am saying, if there's another site, let's say it's further from a school, but there's still a school a quarter mile away. I just want you to know that we are evaluating what what's happening around them. So that point well taken. We will definitely make sure that is communicated. The second one about public transit, this is a useful thing for people to know. One, there's actually a fair number of folks who are in these sites who do have cars. So we end up carrying, not a fair number. I think one of the sites, there's probably like, a half a dozen or so vehicles. And so we need to make sure that there are places for people to have their cars. But the other thing is, in these contracts, the service contracts, we're actually able to design them with transportation requirements by the provider. So they have these little shuttles and things to get people to services. Again, that's not about counteracting your concern as to the Noble site or any specific site. It's just so that folks understand that as we process any of the sites, wherever we end up, we are thinking about how do we make sure people can get to their medication, their doctor's appointments, get to job training, right? Like, it's part of this is creating opportunities for folks to get supportive employment and that kind of thing. So that's that second question you had. So again, not as to the specific site, but just so everybody knows, part of our process is to figure out, like, do we need to get some other transport options in here? And then the third piece about the previous land, I think I'm going to pass this to Jim just a bit, Sandeep, and I would just say Jim has done a lot of work with the team, has done a lot of work evaluating the sites across the city. And maybe, Jim, if you could just sort of give people a snapshot of how much that has involved, so they get a sense of we don't have like magic sites to work from. And before Jim goes, the one thing I want to mention, Sandeep, you had said something, I think, about like perhaps the checking for alternative sites is a result of the community opposition. And I would just share with you that I just rewatched that June 21st council session the other day. And the person who made the motion, Councilmember Perales, actually said in the meeting before we did any of these sessions, go do community outreach and go consider alternative sites. And the board sort of got on, this council got on board. So even then there was a push to come to the community, and we got direction to come to you. So Jim, did you want to add anything before we go to Nancy's question in the chat?
Yes, thanks, Omar. So in terms of, what sites did we look at and that type of thing? So the site search for bridge housing or emergency interim housing has been going on for many years, as probably maybe all the people on this call know. Back, as you mentioned, in 2017, we started the process. We got direction to try and find a site in every council district, all 10 across the city. And the initial focus was on about 99 city-owned sites. And as people may imagine, it's not easy to find a site like this. They just, not many of them exist. And the city was not in a position with its funding situation to just go out and purchase private land, prime private lands that were used for development purposes. So the council had us focus initially on city-owned sites, and then we expanded that search to other public agency sites. And that kind of ultimately got to that list of about 140 sites. Literally all across the entire city. There are no ideal sites. Many of the public agency sites are remnant parcels from other projects, whether they be transportation projects or park projects, where part of it was used for the park, but the rest was a remnant parcel. A variety of different reasons. I'll say this, there are no ideal sites, far from it. And in fact, every one that we have proposed to put it on, there has been opposition to it. So we haven't found any sites that some segment of the community doesn't want them. So that's a difficult reality that we face. It's not easy to find them. We have searched from far north San Jose, Alviso, obviously we're talking in the Berryessa Penitentiary area, to East San Jose, to South San Jose, Central San Jose, the downtown area. We're building a project now that's just north of downtown, near the police headquarters, West San Jose, just a variety of different locations that we have looked. I've been to probably 100 different sites personally, looking to see if we can find something. And an ideal site would be one that probably from a community acceptance standpoint wouldn't be near residences, wouldn't be near schools, wouldn't be near creeks, would be near public transit, a whole variety of things. But when you look at the available inventory of public properties, not many, I would almost say none of them exist. Now, if the council was prepared to allocate more money for private sites, that could be a possibility, but there isn't a lot of funding available. This is a difficult area, providing homeless services and citing these types of things. So with the sites we have, it has not been easy to find an acceptable site. We evaluated about 6 or 7 different sites in District 4, and I think every one of them was in the floodplain, or it was privately owned, or really wasn't large enough to produce enough beds that were going to make a dent in the 5,000 unsheltered people on our streets. So let me stop there. There might be follow up.
Thank you for that.
Jim, thank you for clarifying. I have a follow-up, quick one. So I wanted to repeat that sentence, right? It said the city officer, the city staff cautioned against giving neighbors the opportunity to veto the project. So this is very concerning that the city staff wants to choose a site unilaterally without giving the neighbors any opportunity to select these sites. I understand there were concerns in terms of private land being acquired and the budget being allocated, but this sets a very wrong precedence. Today it is this park, tomorrow perhaps, if this is not controlled, it could be the Cataldi Park or many other public parks that suddenly start being chosen as sites for other development, for other needs.
Yeah.
And not giving neighbors an opportunity to veto the project seems to be very concerning, not just with me, but with a lot of neighbors I've spoken with.
Go ahead,
So,
Jim.
yeah, I will. So Sandeep, I'll accept responsibility and ownership for that statement. I made it at the city council meeting. And I think there's a very clear description of what I meant by that, and what I would recommend to the council is that the community doesn't have the authority to veto a site, that the city council, as our representative government in the city of San Jose, that they retain the responsibility and the authority to select a site. That does not in any way mean that we shouldn't take feedback and listen very intently to the concerns or support or any other feedback that the community may provide, and factor that in to the overall process. But what we've learned is that if the council was to give veto authority to the community and essentially yield their representative kind of government responsibility, probably no sites would be selected in this city, because we haven't come to a community that has demonstrated that they will want this and would stand up for it and want it. So I think it's an important distinction. I'm not saying we shouldn't have community input. That's a very critical part of the process, and the council should absolutely consider that along with staff recommendation and any other information they get. But as our represented elected officials, it's their responsibility to do that. And the mayor and council have articulated that they will be making that decision.
So I want to thanks for that, Jim. And just to reiterate for everybody that's has joined, Omar Passons, Deputy City Manager, Jim Orpal, Head of Special Projects from the City Manager's Office as to this work. And just Sandeep and others, Jim is providing a sort of overarching frame, but again, so that everybody is clear, this is not, we're not here today to sell the community on one side or another. We just want to make sure you have the information. We want to make sure that you know that your comments and feedback will be given to your elected representatives, that we will take your comments and feedback. I'm going to pivot to Nancy's question in the chat. Nancy, this has come up a few times, and we're looking at ways. There are some sort of privacy related things about people's information that we have to control for. But I would say to you, Nancy's question in the chat, for those that may not be able to see it, was essentially, how successful are these? The ones that are in operation? It's a great question, and we're working on being able to share we'll say like aggregated blurb, like a collective blurb. We know that there are higher proportions of people at the Monterey and Bernal site, for example, who are exiting to permanent destinations, then succeed from other types of emergency and interim housing. But we just have to make sure that we're doing that responsibly, Nancy. So our hope is to be able to put a link to that like success information on that same outreach website in the next at some point in the next few weeks or coming months. So I apologize that we don't have that now, but that's the best answer I've got on that one at the moment. And then Dennis had a question in the chat about whether this was, and I'm going to paraphrase. Well, actually, let me pause there. Nancy, does that answer your question? I mean, it technically doesn't answer your question, but I mean, do you understand where we're going and how we'll get to answering that question?
You have to go off mute, Nancy.
Or you can type a response in the chat. If I see her come off, okay, thanks, Nancy. And then to Dennis's question about paraphrasing, essentially, are these sites, is this site the one that is at Noble, or at least the council gave the initial direction to go forward? Is it geared towards a specific population? Is that why the location was chosen? And there's sort of two answers to that. The short answer is that a predetermined population has not been made for that location, like a specific subset. However, the council has asked us, as part of its direction, or I guess directed us, to consider and evaluate the notion of specific populations, like families, right? So the kids could potentially have access to a school, as an example, while they're, again, getting situated to permanent housing, or seniors or veterans or others. So I think their specific direction was to evaluate for families and seniors. The one thing I want to mention about that for Dennis and everybody, just for your awareness, is there are pros and cons to having a specific subset population for a given location. The way that these work at present is that we focus first on the immediate surrounding community. So if you think about, you may have people who are experiencing homelessness that are unhoused in the creek, right, in your community, and you say, well, we want to be able to go to those people in that creek and say, hey, we have something for you that's not the creek. And it's a part of a process that will get you back into a permanent setting. The challenge is, let's say we pick only, moms and kids, let's say, right? We go to the creek, and if only 4 out of 20 or 30 people are moms and kids, then the other people just don't get in. And then you have a site and it has a few people in it, but it's not full. And also it doesn't help the people that are in your neighborhood not be homeless. Again, I don't share that with you to justify. I just want to help people understand some of the things that we have to think about and evaluate in the process. So Dennis, I hope that answered your question. If you want to come off mute, we'll find out, or just type in the chat, either way. So I'll just keep an eye out for Dennis. I do see that Sandeep asked another question about what it says. Why can't sites near commercial areas be chosen for these EIH? If these are temporary, then why do they have to be in residential areas? And I see, Dennis, I see your follow-up, and I think that's so Dennis responded, and we'll continue to try to supplement that our evaluation, right? The council has directed us to come back with more information about both the impacts and the benefits, to your point exactly. But Sandeep, I think the answer, and Jim alluded to this earlier, is that they can be, and in some cases are, in a range of locations. If your question is why are they not exclusively in commercial areas, I would just say that I think Jim's point about them being, about the number of available sites being somewhat constrained is pretty substantial. And so once you run out of those sites, and then say, well, what do you do? The one thing I'll let everyone know is that at the last council meetings that we were talking about in June, the council actually said we could solicit alternative sites. And although we need, site control, we need to have an ability to use the site pretty easily, it broadened what we could consider. And so people have been submitting a range of sites, and you can still do that until August 15th on the website, and we'll take those in and evaluate them. We put some basic criteria to try to make it easy on the community. We have work to do. We understand that. We're public servants. But we only asked you for 4 or 5 pieces of information so that we could then go do the rest and figure it out. I do want to just really quickly, Mike, I'm going to pull up. I put in the background a quick copy, and Jim, maybe you can just explain. It's just going to be the very top of that 140-page, 140 site piece, so that folks get a sense
Sure.
of what we're working with. So
Umar, this is Mike Krause. If I could just interject for just a second and give you some feedback.
Yes, sir.
That I have heard from other community members that are not present today. But this selection of this site was voted upon by the council. Our council member, Dave Cohen, did not go along with this site position. He was outvoted by other council members that were, saying, okay, it's not going in my district, it's going to go into District 4, so I'll vote for that. So there is some politics going on here relative to these placements, I think, of homeless or interim tiny home sites across the city of San Jose that should be addressed equitably across our government representatives. I just want you to hear that.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I think, and you're right, Councilmember Cohen voted in opposition to this location. I think the thing that it can be a little bit unavailing to hear, but if we think about, like, no matter what community in San Jose we live in, we work in, right? We pay tax dollars for roads all over the city. We pay tax dollars for police all over the city, right? And in this case, where we're talking about helping people not live on the street, like, we have one city as a whole, and we're trying to, again, as the council directed, share, as you pointed out, equitably across the region. And so it's possible, and then this is, I think, an example of that, where your council member has said, I don't think that's the right site, and he's your elected representative, and his office is submitting some alternatives that we're also in the process of vetting, and others have said, we as a city really need to move forward. I will say, Mike, that the same others also directed us as staff to look at other sites. So we're doing that as well.
And I would add
Go
in
ahead.
just, Mike, the vote was 8-2. One council member was absent, and the 8 council members, the mayor and council members that voted for it, and then the 2 that voted against it, Councilmember Cohen voted against it, and there was a new recommended site in his district, the Noble site in District 4, and Councilor Mahan in District 10 voted against it, and there was a new site recommended in his district. So the 2 council members that voted against it both had sites recommended in their district. So 4 others that have had sites already in their district voted for it, and in addition, 4 others. So you had an 8-2 vote. It's understandable why a council member with one of these recommended in their district might see it that way. As Omar said, we're looking at alternatives, but when we say look at, call it politics, you can call it, kind of whatever one might want to call it, but it was an 8-2 vote looking to try and solve a citywide problem in a way that the council as a whole said they wanted to try and do one site in every city council district. And we've been working at that for about 6 years now. It's not been an easy path to try and get there. In 6 years, we've gotten 4 districts covered. And so now that direction was reiterated to try and get communities in the remaining 6 districts, which is kind of what we're working on today.
Jim, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there is a tiny home settlement at the Berryessa BART station on Mayberry. I think it's Mayberry and Commercial. Is that not in District 4 already?
That is not in District 4, Mike. That is in Council District 3. You're correct. It's called a bridge housing community. It was the first one the city built. It's on Mayberry Road, very near the BART station, actually immediately adjacent to our city Mayberry Corporation and Maintenance Yard. It's at the entry to that location, but it is in District 3. Being very transparent, the district line is right there, just north of Mayberry Road at the BART station. That is District 4, and District 3 is inside. And in fact, District 2 has 2 communities. They have the Mayberry Bridge Housing Community, Emergency Interim Housing Community, and then they have another one under construction at the Guadalupe site near Taylor 87 Mission Street by Police Headquarters. So Council District 3 has 2 sites. Some may argue that the Mayberry site maybe has more proximity to things in District 4, but the reality is the council has set district boundaries. We have similar questions going on in South San Jose, where they're concerned about projects being kind of right on the council district line. So there are a lot of nuances to it, but Mike, you're correct. We have one there, and it's up and functioning. It serves 40 residences, but it is in District 3, very close to District 4.
And so one thing
That was my only comment, but in the interest of time and focus, please.
Yeah.
I'd like to get those people that are in attendance, their questions asked or engaged.
Mike, I was actually just going to swing back on that, and one note for folks, because that question about the Mayberry one that you were just asking about came up in the chat, and so just so that person knows, one of the things to be mindful of is that version, they're sort of smaller, individualized structures with no bathroom. They're kind of they're 100 square feet or less than that, even maybe 80 square feet. Those are different in kind from what you saw in the video earlier, what we've put on the site, what we're looking to do in future communities. The construction has evolved. So now we're talking about modular built, that have the prefabricated with bathrooms inside and that kind of thing. So just so people understand that distinction. And then there was another question in the chat that I answered in the chat, but I just, in case, again, if you don't have access to the chat where you are, a person asked, why not just do more smaller locations? So there's two parts to that answer. The first and foremost is the decision about the sort of cost benefit analysis is ultimately a decision for the elected leadership to make. But our job is to kind of present the facts, right? So if we're doing a 100-person site and there's enough service providers and people to provide support for all of those, that's positive because it allows us to be responsible with your tax dollars and also serve people in a sort of efficient way. Conversely, to that question about smaller sites, if you do more smaller sites, the cost per person that you help goes up. And with limited resources and that kind of thing, that's the answer to why it might not be smaller sites. Now, ultimately, that's a decision that elected leaders can choose to make. But our responsibility is to present all of this information and allow them to have a really good picture.
Omar, I'd add briefly that when we did the initial sites, the first bridge housing communities at Mayberry and then at Felipe near 280 and 101, they were 40-person, 40-bed sites. So they were smaller. But it was when we were pilot testing the concept and we gained a confidence that we could effectively operate these sites, serve people, help them transition into permanent housing, but recognizing that we have many homeless people to try and get off the street, we were directed by council to consider larger sites. And we've done that with sites between about 76 beds up to 121. And as Omar said, it's more cost effective to do it that way. And we've gained confidence that we can manage them well. It's still a size that we can effectively manage and have it function within a neighborhood or a community.
So Mike, I want to go back to you. Oh, hold on. It looks like we have another one here. Let me see. Yeah. Sandeep's comment is, everything needs money to be spent. Perhaps we need to allocate more budget to solve this problem instead of having artificial constraints. We're one of the highest tax-paying cities in America. What does it take to have budgets reallocated to solve this problem more viably and without ignoring our concerns? And so I guess there's a couple ways to respond to that. I can't really, there's sort of like a philosophical point baked into that question, so I can't answer it completely. But what I can say is, this gets at, I mentioned earlier that one of your neighbors at another session talked about sort of this funnel, right? This notion that there's a really large number of people, over 5,000, who are living outside. And so to Sandeep's question about solving, part of solving is the prevention side of the equation, is investing. And the council has invested more in that prevention side, but there are still more people becoming homeless than are exiting homelessness. And so we've got to work together to bring that front side down so that we're shrinking the number of people. And not everybody needs to go into an apartment or a new home or what have you. Many people can reconnect with family, and we try hard with our service providers to do that. Many people can move into locations with other people and kind of share the expenses. So it's not a one size fits all, Sandeep. And I do understand the question about the scope. And so we'll make sure to share that back as well. And I just put the link again in the chat for folks. Mike, I'm going to pitch it back over to you to see if there are other questions. And as I said, Mike, I would be happy to pull up the top of that 140 site assessment just so people can get a sense if you want.
Omar, thank you very much and Jim, both of you for your feedback here relative to this very, very sensitive issue to not only the Penitentiary neighborhood, but also the Noble Park neighborhood. I mean, and the Berryessa Citizen Advisory Committee. Okay, they've addressed this concern, and our councilman has that concern too. But I do want to say I appreciate you coming on and give us the visibility of what you're working to achieve here. And I want you to, and I think I speak for the people of Penitentiary neighborhood when I state that we still have a concern for this location, this site. I mean, if you think about what you're doing is you're taking a community where there are economics and assimilation of people in this community, and you're introducing a homeless state of that, which is going to affect, and I'll be very candid, the real estate value of some of these homes around here. All of a sudden they're going to say, hey, this value of this house just fell $20,000 because we have a homeless camp 4 blocks away. There's a sensitivity to that. Okay, that's part of it. I don't want to resonate on that. Okay, but I would like to resonate on the fact that if you're going to generate a homeless community, especially about the size that you talked about, Jim, and I know bulk processing is the most effective way of doing it for cost management, then you should consider the industrial areas that have options available to them, like the BART station, which was right next to the Department of Transportation for the city of San Jose area.
The maintenance yard, yes.
Yeah, the maintenance yard. So, I mean, rather than introduce these homeless tiny homes into a community that is focused on safety, security, and inclusion and development, that it's going to cause significant disruption to that community environment, in my opinion. Okay. Not that I want you to hear that.
And Mike, we do hear. I think you were closer when you talked about introducing a modular home. We're not introducing a homeless camp. That's not what we're proposing anywhere. So, right. But we do hear that concern. We absolutely, we're actually packaging the notes from all the sessions so that the council and our bosses and we, as we do more evaluation, really have those. There's one question that came in the chat that I'm going to ask Jim to take a look at from Nancy. Hold on. The one thing I will say to folks, and Jim will probably cover this, is that the notion of identifying cost is it's not, a lot of times folks will just sort of take a top line number, and the news does this quite frequently. They'll take a top line number, they'll divide it by 100 people, and they'll say, oh my gosh, here's the cost. And it doesn't factor in things like, water and sewer and all of the other costs associated. So I just mentioned that for context, but Jim, if you want to go ahead and take Nancy's question, if you can.
Sure. Sure.
Before you get into that, Jim, we're not trying to solve this problem here. All we're trying to do is provide you, Omar and Jim, feedback from this community, our comments and voicing that. So the problem should be solved by the professionals like yourselves, which the council, the city council or the government representatives that we pay to solve these difficult. We're reasonable people seeking reasonable solution to complex problems. There's no doubt about it. So I just wanted to focus this not as trying to solve a problem today, but just to get that feedback. And I think you're doing very well at doing that, both Jim and Omar. So Jim, back to you.
Yeah, Mike. So thank you for that. Your points about, the concerns the community has about the location and the introduction into this neighborhood. And we've heard about proximity to schools and residences, et cetera. It is a very understandable and received point from Omar and I. We get it. I will say this, Mike. I've spent more time over the last 2 to 3 years in my professional life on trying to find suitable sites to address our 5,000 person homeless situation, with hundreds of encampments from Alviso in the north, the South San Jose in the south. I say that to kind of, we don't want to recommend sites that are going to be, universally opposed by the community. We would much rather propose a site that is a easier acceptance by the community. We've put some in those locations and we've kind of run out of those opportunity sites. The easier ones are gone and we're faced with more difficult locations. But as we evaluate the alternatives, we will weigh very carefully the points that you and your fellow association members and residents have made about proximity to residents, schools, a variety of things. That will go into our evaluation as well. We will clearly consider all of that. So we take it very seriously. And I spend my days trying to find what are the potentially best sites. And that's kind of probably my primary responsibility that I got from the city manager. And I literally have been all over the city and I'll keep doing that. If we can find a better site that is more acceptable and meets the other guidelines, we'll be all over that. And Mike, I'm happy to respond to any more thoughts you might have, but going to the other question, Omar, that you sent my way on what's the cost. So when we did the early pilot projects and did the first emergency interim housing kind of modular projects, they were in the $70,000 range. As we all know, we've experienced inflation in the area. That was back in 2017. And then in 2020, early in the pandemic, when different entities were seeking business, our most recent project is about $150,000 per bed per unit. So the price is up, to a certain extent. Fortunately, though, the one that's under construction right now, all of the residential units are being donated by Peter and Susanna Powell, the owners of Sandhill Properties. So the mayor, working with Mr. Powell and Miss Powell, got it donated. So that will keep the city cost part down. But the average overall is about $150,000 per unit. As Omar mentioned, that's everything from designing the site, putting in all of the city utilities. So all of these projects are connected to our sanitary sewer system. So we get people who today in encampments are unfortunately going to the bathroom outside or in porta potties will now have normal plumbing, showers to be clean, laundry that can be done. All of this will then be the water is properly placed into our sanitary sewer system. They have code compliant kitchens and laundry. So the safety of the site is very good. And that's all the construction, getting private company who specializes in building these efficient modular buildings to have them assemble some off-site, bring it on site and complete the assemblage. So all in, it's been about $150,000 per unit. And Omar compared that, how does that match up against a permanent apartment, affordable home? They're different products. They're for different purposes. One is an interim emergency site for people to come into from off the streets. And then as they stabilize, get some service, get in a better place, move to permanent housing, hopefully in about a 6 to 12 month period, moving into a permanent home with family or an apartment or something in our affordable housing inventory. So that's the purpose that we have. They're small units. They're 110 square feet. But they provide some privacy and some dignity and some stability so that somebody can start to try and get back on the track of assimilating more into, a self-sufficient state as opposed to where they're at today. So that's just a little bit of context.
Thanks, Jim. And there was one thing in the chat. I wanted to thank the person. It's kind of similar. Mike at the lead-in said, "Hey, look, we as the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association, we do want to help solve this issue. We just don't agree with the site, with the Noble site." That's a reasonable position to take. Frankly, lots of your neighbors have that same sort of look, we're compassionate. We just want to help find a better location. And one of the people in the chat actually put a suggestion that I think we're going to take back and make sure the council members know, which is like, given that these businesses have all this space, right? Maybe there'll be businesses who are willing to partner where we might be able to use some of their space. Now, I don't know yet, but it's a good suggestion. I just, Mike, I want to make sure you and your members and the neighbors know, Jim and I want more. We expanded pie helps. Now we only have limited folks to do the work, but still, it's good to get these types of creative options. So thank you, and thank that person. The chat has moved up, so I can't remember who it was, but thank you for that.
The other thing I'd just like to mention here too is we're addressing this as a city of San Jose issue, but I think homelessness is a county issue and it's also a state issue. So when we talk about funding constraints and things like that, the city of San Jose should be looking at the county of Santa Clara, and the county of Santa Clara should be looking at California to address this issue, which is a California issue. I mean, San Jose and its weather is a mecca for homelessness. There's no doubt about it.
So Mike, a couple of things I want to say about that. I think it's useful for your folks to have this information. I'm going to put another link in the chat to the state of California's homeless data integration system for folks who may want to go and take a look and say, well, what do we know at a state level? Because we do work really closely with both the state and the county. During that slide presentation, which for everybody who might have missed, it's on the website, so you can download the slides and see them. There's a reference to the coordinated community plan to end homelessness, which is Santa Clara wide, because as Mike pointed out, it is a regional issue. And so the Destination Home and others are working with Mountain View, and they're working with Cupertino, and on and on and on. So all the communities in the region, for exactly the point that Mike mentioned. And in fact, much of the resources that we receive in the city of San Jose come from the homeless housing assistance and prevention dollars. We got $30 million or so from the state of California not that long ago. So there's a partnership. I will say, in full transparency, I think we need more resources from the federal government, because there's as you know, the cost is pretty substantial for rent in the area, but we're also trying to get creative, frankly, about solutions to bring down that cost of it. So just a couple nuggets on that, Mike, and curious if any of your other members or you have questions. We're at your disposal until 11:30. So
no, I think at this particular time, you have addressed, or we have voiced our concerns and questions to you. We have heard back from you and listened to that information. I mean,
can I add one? There was one question that I did see in the chat, Mike. Somebody asked, have we attempted to partner or collaborate with corporations to do this? And maybe I just a brief response on that. The answer is yes. We have made efforts to do that. We were working with Apple Corporation for a site in the North San Jose industrial commercial area, kind of near North 1st Street, Highway 87 area. They own property in that area, and we attempted to do one of these sites back in 2020, but ultimately we couldn't kind of come to an agreement on it. Their interests in their property focused more on wanting to expand Apple's operations in San Jose on about half the site, and the other part of the site they're looking at doing some type of permanent affordable housing, which is a different product and a different purpose, as Omar has referenced, not interim housing for people that are coming from street homelessness to an interim housing environment, but they wanted to do a larger permanent affordable project over the long term. So we attempted there, that didn't work. We are certainly open to that if some corporations want to work with the city in that regard. So we've done some of that out. Our mayor constantly works in that regard. I mentioned him working with Sandhill Corporation, a developer in the area, and they enthusiastically gifted the city money to do this, as a way to try and move some things forward. Our mayor is also working with a couple of other developers in terms of trying to get projects moving where they partner with us, they provide funding and those types of things. So it is an active part. It's not an easy one because, you know, companies are pretty focused on trying to meet their mission and you know, their business needs and those types of things. But if somebody in this community says, you know, my company, you know, and there are many companies in the District 4, North San Jose, Berryessa, Alviso area, if any of you have your company says, we have excess land, we're ready to work with the city, we'd love to hear that, and would be open to that as a suggestion as well.
And Mike, you did have one more question in the chat.
Yeah, I
really-
was wanting to go to Chris, I think it was, or another question, or I was watching that chat.
So let me just, so really quickly, the one that
Zan?
Sandeep just asked about why not use the program that Governor Newsom rolled out last year to acquire hotels and motels instead of building new. And the short answer is the city of San Jose is availing itself of that program, has been successful. The issue just remains that it's just not enough. There's 5,000 folks that we're talking about. And so the council is just saying, look, it's urgent. We got to do more. And so we are doing that. It's a both, I guess you'd say.
And it's in the report, the June report to council identified not only emergency interim housing projects that have been completed and are operating that are proposed, it also has all of the project home key new projects as well, Omar, of which there are 4 in districts 3 and 6, 3, 6, and 2 right now. And it's about 280 units as well that are awarded by the state.
And then
Can I
Zan's
say
question, and I apologize if I've said the name wrong, Zan, about understanding the qualifications to reside. And I mentioned this earlier, but you may not have been on, and that's okay. The council actually directed us to evaluate a couple of subpopulations potentially for a site in your community. Not necessarily this specific site. Again, we have the direction to consider alternatives, but wherever it ends up being in your community, they want us to come to evaluate families and seniors, and we'll do that evaluation. And Zan, the sort of comma is just be aware that because our approach is to focus on trying to offer people that housing in your community first, like help the homeless, unhoused people in your community get housed. If you constrain the population, there may be people who are in your community who aren't eligible. So that's just one of the things we have to factor in. It's not something for you to worry about, but we just want to share it so you know that we are trying to think through all the issues. Mike, I'll go back to you.
Okay, at this particular time, I'd like to just say, I'm going to share a screen. So please be patient with me while I do this. How do you share this screen? Okay, hold on. Work with me. Share screen. Okay. So I'm just getting back to my presentation I put together to initiate this. And what I want to say is, first of all, I want to thank everybody for their participation. And that is Omar, your time on a Saturday, Jim, your time on a Saturday, and everybody else in the P&A community that has contributed this feedback to Omar and Jim. I know that Dave Cohen is getting our feedback, and so I know that you will take this feedback, and we as the Penitentiary Neighborhood Association, if we think of any good ideas, we now have your points of contacts that we can bring that to your attention. As far as the chat, I assume people could download that chat link to get all the information that was in there. As far as the video, I will share that with Omar. I don't know if I have Jim.
If you get it to me, we'll make sure that it gets linked on the site so that everybody can watch.
Okay. And so at this particular time, I'd just like to say thank you. And I was going to say, have a nice day. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.